Hello and welcome to the Cook Memorial Public Library podcast, where we invite you to spend a few minutes with the staff at Cook Library. I'm Nate Goss, and I'm here with Lindsay Barber Petticourt, our digital services librarian, who also happens to love comics. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks for having me.
We're doing a little thing we like to call Quick Draw, where we take just a few minutes to recommend a comic or graphic novel we're digging at the moment. We don't have a lot of time, so let's get right into it. Lindsay, what comic are you reading right now?
Right now I'm reading The Influencing Machine by NPR's On the Media's Brooke Gladstone, and it's illustrated by Josh Neufeld.
Okay, and can you just tell us briefly what's this about?
It's essentially Brooke Gladstone's piece on the media, but instead of being her weekly podcast, it's a visual history of the media.
Okay.
And kind of the interchange between the media, the public, and the government.
And so when you're saying media, are we talking television? Are we talking newspapers? What are we talking about? Everything?
Yes, we're talking about
all of the above. Okay.
Everything, yes.
Okay. So is this a newer graphic novel, or how did you find out about it?
This came out in 2011, so it is a couple of years old. It actually came about from a patron who attended a program of mine, and we just got to talking about what librarians do with recommending books and other forms of media. And he was telling me about this book, The Influencing Machine, and kind of how nothing comes from nothing, like how certain books get published. Why do those books get published? It's more specifically about the news, but how news gets published, why what is important becomes important and important enough to share with the public.
So, it's an interesting topic, but why do you think that topic in particular, talking about the media, why do you think it lends itself to a comics format? I mean, Brooke Gladstone is not... She's a radio host, so
yes.
You don't think of her as being someone associated with comics, but why do you think this happens to work very well as a comic?
I think there are times it could become a little dry because you're getting into the history of
Sure.
journalism, and unless you're a journalism student, that could possibly be a little bit boring. But she even talks in The Influencing Machine about how narrative can be important in news stories. It can create a bias, but it can be very important. And part of that narrative includes visuals, that some things don't become important unless there are visuals. She mentions Abu Ghraib as
That's a good one, yeah.
People had talked about the torture that people experienced in Iraqi prisons before the pictures of Abu Ghraib were released.
But it took the pictures.
It took the pictures to catch people's attention, and I think there's a little bit of that with this graphic novel.
This is actually the first graphic novel or comic that we recommended on this podcast. We probably have some listeners who maybe have never even read a comic book or graphic novel. Do you think this one could be a good one for the newbies who are looking to give comics a shot, or would this be more for someone who's already read a few graphic novels and is just looking for something kind of new?
I think this would actually be an excellent introduction to graphic novels and comics because it's just the medium that this story is being told in.
Right.
With some comics, they can get very self-referential and calling back to like the old Superman comics.
Sure,
and
like the history of comics.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there are some comics where it's like, I don't know, there's some pieces of literature where if you don't know everything about Shakespeare and Shakespeare's plays, you're missing out on stuff.
Sure, yeah.
And the same could be said for some graphic novels. And whereas this, there's a little bit of that. There are a few references that I was like, oh, I've read that or I've seen that somewhere. But you don't miss her point. You don't miss the story.
Right. And it seems like it's a very standalone thing, too. Like
it is.
You're not getting into a big series or,
Right.
You're not even really getting into the superhero thing.
You don't even have to worry about any individual characters.
Sure.
It's just Brooke throughout the story.
Yeah.
And then historical characters, actual historical figures and media figures.
You bring up a good point. I've seen a lot of nonfiction graphic novels, whether it's memoirs or histories or biographies, or even introductions to different topics or subjects. Why do you think a lot of authors are moving towards comics to tell these types of stories? Is there something about comics that lends itself to this?
I don't know. I think For me, I'm a visual person. I tend to remember things if I have seen pictures or graphics along with them. So I think it's maybe for that subset of people that really learn better with pictures, with graphics. I mean, just having infographics has been, there's been a boom of that in the last 10 years. And I think it's just that it's reaching a certain set of people who need that instead of just text. And it's easier to share on the internet.
That's true.
If you're sharing just, a 20-page article on the internet with nothing.
Yeah, here's a PDF to download. Yeah.
Right. Whereas, you can share infographics and you quickly get the information.
Yeah, it seems like a very scannable media that
Right.
you can kind of run your eyes across and get a lot of information very quickly.
It is. I could do that very quickly with this, which was nice, but it's also kind of a reference text almost for the history of journalism. And I feel that way about all graphic novels. You can get a lot just by scanning a page, but there's so much more if you just go back and dive into it.
Sure. Do you have a favorite section or piece of information that you got from reading The Influencing Machine?
Oh, man. My favorite piece of information is just kind of a little bit of trivia, and it's early on in the book, and it doesn't really have too much to do with the rest of the book, but she was talking about libel lawsuits hundreds of years ago in England, and basically before they changed their laws, and it was quite a long time before they changed their laws, if you were sued for libel, you could not enter the truth as evidence that you shouldn't be sued for libel. The truth had no bearing. It didn't matter. If the king said that's libel, then it's libel. It doesn't matter what the truth actually was. I just thought that was so
nonsensical.
Yes, like
what's the point?
Surrealism. I don't. Is this Dadaism in government? So yeah, that was fascinating.
Yeah.
But overall, there were just aspects of history that I guess I never really thought about from journalism's side, just how certain things were covered. She talks a lot about war in here because war is kind of this special thing when it's covered by the media because it's its own beast instead of like just general politics reporting or something like that.
That sounds great. Lindsay, I want to definitely thank you for being on the podcast and sharing your Quick Draw Comics pick.
Thanks.
So if you would like to check out The Influencing Machine by Brooke Gladstone, or explore any of the library's collection online, make sure to visit our website, cooklib.org, and there you can search our catalog and make sure you pick it up. And next time you're on the World Wide Web, take a tour through Shelf Life, the library's blog where we blog about books, movies, music, genealogy, and local history. That blog can be found at shelflife.cooklib.org. If you'd like to get in touch, send us an email to webmaster@cooklib.org. And if you're liking what you're hearing, be sure to support us. Share this with your friends and maybe leave us a positive rating on iTunes. We will be back soon, but until then, keep reading, keep watching, and keep listening.